Alright, and welcome. This is David, aka Faramir4731. I'm going to bring you a quick tutorial on how to start a Russia campaign the best way. Okay, so some of the hardships you're going to start with right off with Russia is your military force. You start off with a very weak, a very small military force, as you can see up here by Ingria in Moscow. And over in Ukraine, you have two small armies of pretty unimpressive units. And factoring in with the fact that you start off with a very porous 6,000 starting bank, and that with a very vast empire and a very undeveloped empire at that, it can cause quite a bit of hardships for you to be able to work on expanding this empire very early. So let's take a look at a few of the units you're going to start off with. Now these Gordo, Skinny, however you want to say it, they are a relatively cheap unit. 520 for recruiting, 130 for upkeep was fairly cheap. Problem is their morale is absolutely horrid. They do have a decent charge bonus and melee attack. Defense is not anything to write home about, but it's all in the melee attack with Russia, and you can see that from their melee troops. If you pair these up with a decent general, you'll get some morale boosts from your general in the field. As you can see, you do get some +1 commanding benefits with this general, but also a -1. But you do boost your morale up on your men in battles as long as you team those up with a good general. Now, the Cossacks are basically Russia's militia unit, and the morale is pretty decent for a militia unit. And you can see ammunition is only 15 at this point in the game, just because of where you researched at, which is standard for all the lines at this stage of the game. But the reloading skill of 20 is not terrible, and accuracy is pretty good for a militia unit. So this is definitely a unit you want to consider for putting in your early game arsenal. Now your melee attack is not super, neither is your defense with this unit, but you get a pretty decent firing unit, which is actually better than your reloading skill of your actual line. They actually reload faster than your line infantry does. Sadly as it is, the Russian line is the worst line in the game as far as shooting is concerned. 35% accuracy and only 15 reload. It's even worse than Austria, which is pretty sad. So, considering the fact you only get 120 men, but the big difference with the Russian infantry is in their melee. Their melee attack is, with France, the best in the game, but their charge bonus is even better than France's. So it's all about the melee attack with these units. As you can see, their melee defense is one of the worst in line infantry in the game, and their morale is 7, which is one better than Austrian line. But again, this unit is not considered to be one of the best line units in the game. As you rank it up with chevrons, it can be at least a little bit better, but you must keep in mind going up against other line infantry on your opponent's side with chevrons is going to be vastly better than your line infantry. Now, some of the early game cav you're going to have access to is the alter ego of this unit, which is their cav counterpart. You can see the morale is not much better. Defense is absolutely horrid. Their charge bonus is decent, and their melee attack is halfway decent. So this is a good shot cav. Definitely not something you want to leave in melee. But for the price, for a cav unit, only 100 upkeep, not a terrible shot cav or disrupting cav for your arsenal. That brings us to one of the things that you're going to want to get to is usually what I will do is over here in Komi, I will actually make this my military governor's barracks, and it gives you access to the one Siberian hunters. Now, Siberian hunters don't look this cool in the map. They look like little Eskimo dudes, but this is a very good unit in the fact that you get 90 range, 50 accuracy, reloading skill of 30, ammunition of 20, and your melee attack is not what you want out of this one, but it's still not even bad. Defense is, obviously better than what your militia is, but the big difference is if you want to sustain a firefight, having these Siberian hunters in your arsenal is well worth putting Comey into a military governor's barracks, simply for the fact you're not going to make any money out of this region anyway, as this region does not have much development in it. So you're never going to make much money out of it, so why not at least use this as a military post? But the negative is you're going to have to spend a lot of time moving men forward to the front lines where you're going to need them. So you're going to want to get this converted over fairly early in the game so you can keep pushing those men forward to the battle lines, but it can be well worth it because it could be quite a while before you have access to Mesopotamia, where you could actually get a similar unit, which would be Afghan hillmen. And again, that might be an option for you to give you some kind of firepower with the Russian line infantry lacking. So one option you can face with your low income and the developmental needs of your region is to go ahead and look at spending your money right off on Moscow to get this region up to its potential. You want to increase these farms, get this up to its absolute capacity of what it can achieve, and then you can work on the regions next to and neighboring it, getting the farms so you can get that population up to where you can get the potential of Russia to where it can be. Now here's something you can do turn one to add some income. So some of your neighbors are going to want to take some of your regions from you early game. So one of the things you can do early to actually make money out of that transaction versus just losing the region is you can actually trade them to them, depleting their money in the process. You can try to get some money out of them, which again, sometimes it takes renegotiating, but you can eventually get that to happen. Okay, and then they agree, and now you have an extra 6,000 in your pocket, and that can be a very much needed. And you don't have to stop there. Georgia also will be going after Don Biasco, so let's go ahead and get some money out of them for it. And it is done, and we can also now put that 13,000 into our empire to help produce a much better quality of empire here. So this early money right off the bat is vastly important. And again, I will spend the money on Comey so we can get this region to where it is going to make us some money. And I spend the money all on our capital regions, all on the governor's residence to get them to what their potential can be, and then focusing on infrastructure afterwards. Again, some of these other regions back here can be quite profitable little areas for you, but you are going to have to spend the resources early to get them to where they can actually achieve that status. So, and now you still have some money to spend on increasing your farms and your other regions that are lacking. and then later you can focus on adding more military on the second turn. But this gives you a huge boost to the first turn, so where you can increase your standings. The other thing you want to do is go ahead and go after, obviously, Crimea. It is a massive necessity for you to get this port. So you can take your 2 armies onward and go ahead and start moving your priest over to start converting that population. And then you're going to want to get your guy in here and start researching empiricism. Also, let's not forget fixing your cabinet. It is hugely important because your ministers are trash early game. You can switch some around as the first thing I will do to get people in place where they're in their best possible position, and then I start moving in the worst guys first and then moving in the rest. That way you can clear out the cabinet and get in these better suited guys into the spots that will best suit them, such as this guy would be a good man for our military. Even though we have this guy, he could be considered a backup, or you can just outright replace him. But you can see that's going to improve you quite a bit here and there. And then you have this guy who can switch up, and you might even want to check him out, see if he is a better guy, and he is not, for your treasurer. So here you can see this gives you a big boost, brings you up to 5,000, and then you can look at, is there anybody possible you can trade with? You don't need to trade with Sweden. You will be at war with them, so there's no point in boosting their economy. And there's no other people really that is going to be a decent boost for you to trade with, because Georgia and Dagestan, even though you have traded regions to them, you will still be at war with them shortly. So your other regions here in the south will be at risk from Dagestan, but this is obviously a push to get yourself built up to where you're in a better position to be at war with them early game. Okay, so after the intern, you're going to want to make sure to check for your new ministers that you have received. And you have one guy, but he does not look like somebody you're going to want just because of the negative aspects, but he does look possibly better than the one you have in. So we will put him, and he is actually a little bit better. But again, you don't have a navy, so you can still look to improve this minister each turn. Okay, and once again, so fighting in Crimea, you're going to be fighting with a much smaller force versus a much more superior force of manpower. But Crimea at this point in the game is going to be very depleted. However, they do have a Cossack cav, which can be quite deadly, as you will be able to have access to this unit fairly early game after you've researched your well, you know what I mean. Alright, so as you can see here, this is my method of using Russia. Not necessarily has to be the only way or the best way. This is the way I do it that's been successful for me. So hit and run tactics with your cav, and using your melee to sweep in and take them out has been quite effective for me in the early game, and it can be for you as well. And again, hopefully this is helping you out. If it is, please smash that subscribe button, hit the like button as well. It does help out, and you can be notified of future content. Now, a couple other things to make sure that you do is to keep your main general as safe as possible, but you want him close enough to where he inspires these troops. because again, a lot of these units are low morale and you're going to need that morale boost. But don't put him in such a harm's way that you're going to end up losing that general. The second general, you can actually lose him and he will not die on the battlefield. So that's one kind of tip there that can help you out as well. But the main general, if you lose him, it can be catastrophic for you. You will mass rout possibly, so make sure that you keep that in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is make sure that your melee troops do have a time to break between fights, just as I did in this battle. Otherwise your men will be too exhausted to fight, especially when you're fighting a larger army. So that's another thing to kind of keep in mind. So what I do is I typically hold somebody in place while my shooting units can continue to fire, and then we can just end up running them down at the end. Another little important thing that you're going to want to make sure you get done is after you win the battle, you're going to want to make sure you're going to run down the retreating men as best you can. Hopefully you still have cav left where you can do that, because leaving these men for another battle is definitely not what you want to do. You want to try to wipe them out as much as possible. Okay, and so after that point you can gain your victory and take Crimea, which will add considerable amount and ability to trade with other nations, which will absolutely gain you tremendous amounts of resources. Now, the Ottomans will blockade your trade, so you need to trade wisely to nations that you feel you can get trade through. So whereas turn 1 was about building up your economy, turn 2 will be everything about building up your military force, as you're going to need everything you can get your hands on pretty early in this game. So building up your military will be vastly important for you early in this campaign. So turn 2, you will start seeing dividends paying out with some of your economy buildings being produced, and your economy will start increasing, but you're going to have to balance this again versus your army upkeep, because you're not going to have a great deal of trade income. So it's going to be vastly important for you to make sure your tax income is at its best potential, and then start spending your resources again on resource building buildings in your capitals. So that's what we will be focusing on this turn. And you will have some of these craft workshops and weaver workshops that you can build. They will add a great deal. You want to do that in Moscow first, and that will add quite a bit. Now, any building past this will start giving you negative influence, but these first 2 levels will actually not cause any negative effects to your region and add quite a bit of wealth, and 10 plus per turn to each town in your region, which adds up after quite a while. As you get late in the game, this is what builds your economy. One other unit also that you might want to consider is the Kalmyks. They do actually fare quite more comparably to these militia cav in the fact that they actually do give you a bow cav unit. Now, they're not the most accurate, and neither are they the greatest at reloading, but they do give you another added layer to your units that can be nice. As you throw your men into melee, you can have them come behind with the bows. So this is a pretty decent unit that you can add to your arsenal. And eventually, Sweden will declare war on you, so you will need to be prepared for that. That's why building your military up is going to be very important for you. Okay, so hopefully this gives you a little bit of help in starting your Russia campaign. And just remember, I'm not the expert. I'm just trying to help the best I can. Hopefully it does help somebody out there. Thanks again, everyone. We'll see you on the next one.